In day 2 of the World Rapid Championship, we had an unexpected 18-year-old sensation storming through the field, beating 3 Super GMs. Now, one of them was Fabiano Caruana, and that's the game we're going to look at today. And then the other 2 guys were referenced in the thumbnail. I'll give those names at the end in case you don't know who they are. And in the meantime, if you want to try and guess who this could be, then feel free to do so. And I'll also give an update of the results of the tournament so far, the standings, towards the end of this video. So let's see what happened. The mystery player had white and kicked off with pawn d4. So Fabi goes knight f6, c4 played, e6 on the board, and after knight f3, d5, we're back in a queen's gambit declined, and after knight to c3, Fabi now goes bishop b4, the Ragozin variation. So this can get really sharp. Say if white goes bishop to g5, which is the main move here, and you see things like h6, g5, knight e4, really sharp stuff, pressuring this knight. But what we see here is pawn to e3. So trying to keep a lid on all of that theoretical craziness. And after this castled king, now we see the bishop coming to d2, just protecting this knight some more. So Fabi develops like this. Rook c1 played, and now bishop e7, weird looking move to lose a tempo with that bishop, moving it again. But because white's played e3 and then put the bishop inside the pawn chain, this bishop still looks fine even though it's lost the tempo. White's going to have to spend some time trying to develop this one later in the game. So bishop d3 now played. We see the pawn takes on c4, this one recaptured, and now a6 from Fabi, so he sets up a queenside expansion idea, and you can go a4 to shut that one down. It's the favourite move of the engine here, but instead we see the bishop dropping back, and now Fabi starts with c5, castle's played, and then b5. So Fabi's actually more than equalised here. He's taken that queenside space. And after this move of pawn to a4, it does beg the question of why that wasn't played sooner to just shut down the expansion, because now black can kick on with b4, the knight found a home here, and the bishop develops to b7. So Fabi's better, white's under pressure. Best is to actually take here, but that wasn't played. Instead, the knight dropped back, does keep more tension, but Fabi brings the rook. These pawns start to look menacing, and the queen's coming to a5, this one could be a target. So queen e2 was played, completes the development, also attacks this pawn, but queen a5, multi-purpose move, defends this one, also attacks here. But knight e5, really nice tactical response. This is what you see from the young guys, and it sets a trap for black. If you take the pawn, then there's rook a1, and you're actually going to be trapping this queen because it can't retreat here or here. That's covered by the knight since it jumped. This one's covered by the bishop, so you'd have to come here, but then you can start chasing the queen, and it basically gets checkmated. This is a sample variation. You can't keep it on the board. White's better. So the pawn's immune, it wasn't taken. Now what Fabi should do here, and this is a big turning point, is take the knight on e5. Then after the pawn recaptures, you drop back here, and because this is attacked, the best is f4 to defend it, and then black can pick up this a-pawn. This time if you go rook a1, well, you've got a retreat square on c6, the knight's no longer on a5. So this would be better for black, because now you've got this 3-on-1 on the queen side here. Those could become dangerous. The white attack shouldn't be too hard to repel when you're running this with the engines. So that was the way to go, but Fabi misses it. He goes rook f to d8, and this now allows the knight to come to c4, picks up a tempo against the queen, and then e4 is played, liberating the position, and now things are very tense, very tactical. Now, the top line of the engine is to take on d4, but then you're opening the c-file against your queen, and it gets very scary. There's stuff like e5, knight d5, knight d6 coming. Now, the computer wants to actually sack the queen here, which is kind of crazy, go for compensation like this. Obviously not going to go deep down that line, but it's a very interesting one. But Fabi didn't take on d4. He went bishop to c6, shutting the c-file. He doesn't want to sack his queen here. And so now when e5 comes and the knight hits d5, at least he's now positioned to take that pawn in a moment. The c-file is blocked. But white's now better. So they could have picked up a very good initiative here with pawn to f4. It's the kind of move you imagine Bobby Fischer would have played in an instant. So if black now takes on d4, well then there's pawn to f5, massive attack. And if you go g6, this is the really nice thing about the line, you still go pawn f5. And no matter how black captures that pawn, I mean capturing's not the best, but if they capture, you can crash through with one of the minor pieces, actually taking with either is good. And then there's this huge attack coming with the queen, the rook swinging in, you've got the bishop could join the party at the right moment. So the whole thing is just devastating when you actually start running through the lines. But f4 wasn't played. Instead, the knight came to e4, and this is a more positional idea to plant a knight on d6. Looks really scary, and it is scary for black if white does it in the right way. So after Fabi captures the pawn, here we see white go wrong. So the best way to play is knight e to d6, for the key reason that now the queen covers this pawn. So this tactic doesn't work, because now when white takes on c8, and you're threatening now to take here with check, by the way, so if queen recaptures, that's the main move, well then you can actually take on e5, you pick up this loose knight. That's the key thing about this whole variation. And so here actually you wouldn't be able to take with the queen, your best is to take on d3. But what we see in the game is that this knight jumps to d6, but now black can go for this knight takes on e5 move, and it's just crazy tactical complications now. Because when you take on c8, which was played, then Fabi can recapture with the queen, and this time you're not losing a knight here. So after white takes this pawn here, hitting the queen, then black can flick in this pawn to d3 move, and although black's an exchange down here after bishop captures, knight takes, queen takes, there's this knight c3 move. Devastating idea, opening up this rook, and there's only one move here for white to play to actually stay in the game. And the key thing to recognise is that because the rook is on this bishop, plus this one's attacked twice, you have to go queen c4 here, so that after bishop takes, then at least you can get the queens off the board, rook recaptures, and you're not dropping this bishop now, you've decoyed that rook away. And now this knight's attacked, but it isn't taken immediately. This is playable, but then the pawn comes on to b3, the rook can slide across to block it, offering back an exchange, but actually black's best is to not take the exchange, but cement the bishop on c2, tying down this rook, stopping them from getting into the game. Now the position's roughly level, but a bit better for black when you're running this with the engine, so white didn't go down this line, instead they attacked this bishop first, so that if this knight moves away, you take this piece. So it came to d3, and now again the pawn didn't capture for the reasons mentioned. Instead the bishop took, pawn recaptured, rook takes, and we go in now for this endgame where you've got the two bishops against the rook. Now normally that would be better for the bishops, but because of the lack of pawns here opposing these queenside pawns of white, this gives good counterplay, and it's black that has to be really careful to now hold the equilibrium. So we see the king coming. Now this rook attacks the bishop, and here already Fabi doesn't play the most accurate move. So he should go bishop to c2, because now the rook needs to come behind the pawn to protect it here. It's not on this dangerous d file, and after bishop c5, pawn advancing, you can blockade it like this. This is one sample line, and it's just not so easy basically for the rook to keep making inroads, especially when the king starts marching in. Now really complicated, don't want to go down tons of lines here, but what we see in the game is the bishop dropping back, but now this rook invades down the d file. Now black is still okay if they play a different move to what Fabi did. So he went bishop f6, ceding this important d6 square. If he goes like this is stronger. Then if the rook slides, you can retreat this one here, and even though the pawn can advance, it's not really going anywhere as the king can start walking over. Now you can go bishop f6, hit this pawn, etc. So it's subtle stuff here. But in this position here, after rook d7, because Fabi goes bishop f6 immediately, hitting this pawn, now there's pawn a5, this one drops, and rook d6, this critical square. You hit this bishop on the 6th rank, and after it moves, then you advance the pawn. And actually black here is now forced to give up a bishop to stop the pawn promoting. So that's what we see, rook recaptures. Now how do we assess this one? Well, it should be a draw, technically. But white's the one who can now press, play for tons of moves, and that's what we see. So first off, the king starts marching in, comes all the way around here over to the queen side, and then we see these kingside pawns just start to nudge their way up the board. We see this one coming to f4 in just a moment after it's attacked. f4, bishop goes. Now Fabi right now, he's defending fine. The king's here solid, holding the f7 pawn. The bishop's just running around the board. And now Fabi finds a nice shot. Pawn to h4, and after takes here, he can take on f4, liquidating a pair of pawns, and he's doubled these ones on the h-file. So the rook drops back, hits the bishop, it now comes into g4, bishop goes, and now king d6 was played, and this sets a trap. Because you can't go bishop b4 check to kick it away, and the king actually now boxes in this black king, stops these escape squares, so there is a threat in the position which Fabi now misses. He has to go king f8 here, because then if this pawn pushes on, you can now capture, and there's no rook here, checkmating the king. What we see in the game is bishop to f2, and now the pawn kicks on, and it can't be captured. This is a big problem. Then you get mated. So because it can't be captured, now we see king f8, but bang, white is winning a pawn, and this is devastating. So the bishop comes to e3, now we see the rook coming here, bishop goes, and now these pawns basically get liquidated, there's nothing black could do, and this is a lost endgame, because the bishop can never actually give itself up for the pawn. The endgame would then be lost with the rook and king against king. And how do you actually stop this pawn from marching through now, plus stop the mate threats against the king, which the rook and king are going to create? So I'm going to whiz through these next few moves here, reach a critical position at move 77. We see this rook moving around the board, white's getting time back on the clock as well, and then when we get to this position here, king to h7 played, well now we get this rook to e2 move, and this bishop has a horrible decision to make, because if you go to say c1 or f4 and stay on this diagonal, keep the white king cut, well then the rook can invade here and check the king. And you could get a line like this, the king invades and then the pawn is coming. There are mate threats as well, of course, and black just can't deal with it all. And if you go here, which Fabi played in the game, so stopping rook e7 check, well now the king comes out of the box and the pawn starts marching. This is the problem. King goes, king h5, and here we actually had a resignation from Fabi, because you can't stop the rook from coming to this 7th rank. This is the problem. Whether it comes here or here or here, once it invades, the king's then come into g6, and between the mate threats and the threat of promoting the pawn, black can't help but give up the bishop, and then you're not long for this world. So who was the mystery man? Well, it was the one and only Vincent Kaymer. Now he had an absolutely storming day. He's now really knocking on the door of the world's elite, and he's poised in 2nd place with 2 others, chasing Magnus Carlsen a half point behind, so we're in for a tantalising day tomorrow. And who were the other 2 Super GMs he beat? Well, one was Yu Yang Yi, and the other was Arjun Erigaisi, another peer in his own generation. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see another epic game played by Hans Niemann, then check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.